Hey everyone, my name is Franzi and this is the second part in a full browser Flash website tutorial. First of all, let's check out what we've done in the first part, and this is the result. So we've programmed all the positioning and scaling of our layout object. For this part, we're going to add all the interactivity. So we're going to add the rollover and out events and the click functions and events for our buttons and navigation. We'll change the sections here and create some simple transitions. And after we're done with that, we'll go and add the XML functionality, so that the content that has to be will be XML driven. Okay, so let's first of all add the rollover events for our buttons. If we check out the navigation folder here in the library, we have our nav item. Nav item is actually the button that is being put on the stage with this for loop over here, right? So we position it and put it up with this for loop. So we can go inside of our nav item, which we've exported over here, and we can add to the action that we already have, which kind of style the text a bit. And let's do the rollover and add the event to this. So this is the object, the nav item object. Any nav item object that we put on the stage will actually think of itself and add the event listener that will listen for rollover events to itself. So here we go, add event listener, have the mouse event, but here we go, and roll over, on over, and let's make a function, on over, evt, mouse event, void, and close. Let's copy paste the event listener and make another one for the rollout. So roll out, and change the function to on out. So we can copy paste this function down here and change the on over to on out. So now all we need to do is to animate or change the property of our button when we roll over or roll out inside of these functions. Let's use our green sock classes for the first time, so that's what we're going to use for animating. We have the green sock folder in our com folder, so that's how we're going to access it and import it to our Flash application. So import com.greensock.tweenlight. Anyway, greensock is a tweening class, a library that you can download from the web. In my opinion, it's awesome, and it allows you to do a lot of stuff inside of the action script that you would otherwise have a hard time doing, and it's also pretty well optimized. So let's use it to animate our buttons when we roll over and roll out. This is how you do it. So tween light 2. So we're going to tween 2. And the object that we're going to use is this. The time is going to be 0. Let's say 2 for now. 2. And we're going to tween the Y position. And it's going to be -10. So we want it to go up for 10 pixels. And when we roll out, we want it to go back to 0. And we don't need this extra space. Okay, so this should work. I think everything is okay. And if we go in here, we can see the rollover and out working. Let's check the external player, it'll look better. Yep, that's it. So now we have the rollover and rollout animation, and it's pretty simple, right? You program it for a single button inside of the movie clip. You use the object this, so it's calling itself, and you animate it with this, and you get the nice rollover and out effects, which are pretty simple, but anyway, it looks effective in the design that we have. Okay, so now that we have our roll over and out, we'll go to navigation actions over here, and what we're going to do is add the click functionality to our buttons. And the first thing to do is to add the event listener to our nav item. So our nav item add event listener, and this is going to be a mouse event click, on nav click. And let's create a function on nav click that is going to be called when we click, of course, and pass the event evt mouse event void open and close. And let's check it up here. So we have our nav item name property being changed to I, and we can read that value in here by accessing the evt target dot name. Okay, so now when we click, we see 0, 1, 2, and 3. And the first functionality that we're going to program is the fact that when we click on one of these navigation buttons, it should stay in the hover state, so up here as to indicate which section of the site you're currently on. And when we click on the next one, that button should actually just jump down and so on. So let's first of all create that kind of system which is going to help us create the functionality for our navigation. Let's add some initial variables that we're going to need. And this is the button array. Array equals new array. So, and the current button variable, which will actually hold the object that is the current button. So when we click on a button, we'll switch each time the current button and equal it to the button that we're clicking on. You'll see that in action. It'll be less confusing than it sounds. So here we have current button, and we'll use that inside of the onClick function and change it. First of all, though, we need the initial state. So when we come into our website, we are already on this Who We Are home panel, which is welcoming you. And for that reason, we should make that first button right here be in the hover state initially. So if we go out, let's create a function initial navigation void, and let's tell our button how it should behave initially. To access it, we're going to use our button array. So let's push our nav item into the button array, so nav item. So we're going to have the an easier time accessing them, right? All 4 buttons are going to be stored in our button array, the references to them, and we can access them. So if we go into initial navigation, and if we want to access the first button, we just say 0 in here, and dot y equals -10. Okay, let's also run that function right here, and let's add a little comment. So initial state, come on, of navigation. Here we go. And here it is, right? So now I over and out and it's going back, but we need to also address that issue. Initially also, the first selected button, so the first current button would be our button array 0. So our first button, the Who We Are button on the left. And current button, let's copy paste, okay, equals button array 0. So now we've already stored our button array 0 into our current button, because by default when we come onto our website, this button is selected and the section of this button is being displayed. Okay, and we also need to remove the event listeners from it. So if we go into our nav item, which is our button, okay, here we go. We'll now make a function for adding and removing our event listeners. So first of all, add listeners void and close, and let's just cut and paste these 2 in here. And also function remove listeners and void and open and close. And now again, paste it in here and change the add to remove. And this will be the function which removes our event listeners from the button when we click on it. Also the function up here that adds it when we click on a different one. And we'll do that right now. First of all, we'll add the event listeners from our for loop over here. So right here, we'll use our nav item to access that and add event, add listeners actually, listeners. So that's the function that we've prepared inside of the nav item. And if we run that now, we can see that it still works. Okay. It works even though we didn't, even though we didn't actually run the add listeners function from the movie clip nav item. We've done that from the stage using the nav item reference right here. So nav item add listeners. And that's required in order to be able to remove listeners from here also. So let's go to onClick. And let's actually just for the moment show how we would use that. So EVT target dot remove listeners. And when I click, it's removing the listeners from it. And now they're all, and also if I click on that one, it happens the same. So this is the kind of behavior that we're looking towards. We're just not there yet. So we have our initial navigation, our initial state of navigation set. We have the functions prepared inside of the nav item. All we need to do now is to achieve a system which will allow us to just click wherever we want and everything will work appropriately. So current button dot y equals 0. Okay, and that's the previous button right now. So down here we equal our current button with button array 0, which means that we store a reference to the first button, who we are button, to current button. And whichever other button I click, I want the previous button, so in this case right now still the current button to 0. Okay, it's a bit confusing, but once you get it, it's not that hard. So let's just comment it. This is still a previous button we're talking about. So when we're clicking on a button, this is still being the previous button. And current button dot add listeners. Okay, this would be the next button now. Okay, so let's check this out now. Okay, this one jumps down, and we need to now fix the remove listeners for the next one, of course. First of all, current button equals EVT target. So from this point on, the current button is the actual button that you've just clicked on, and now we can talk to current button and tell him to remove his listeners. Our initial navigation over here needs to also remove listeners, of course, from the current button, which is the first one. So now if we hover, nothing happens. And let's click and click and click and so on. So that's it. Nothing too hard. It's just kind of a logic thing, just removing and adding of listeners, and the fact that we're able to store our reference to the previous button and then actually override it and work with the current button that we're actually clicking on, all using a single variable, and it's exactly the kind of behavior that we want. So one more thing we do need to do here is to remove and add the event listeners for click. And first of all, let's add it for the previous button, so current button, while it still holds a reference to the previous one, dot add, and let's just copy paste this like so. Here we go. and the current button, so the one that we've just clicked, like so, we want to remove it from. Okay. Now we need to remove it also from this one. So current button remove, and now it should work. So here we go. Nothing happens. We got a nice switch in states, and also if I double click on a button, it doesn't go back down or remove the event listeners that it shouldn't. So now we have a nice and functioning system, and we'll go on to actually changing the content that we see in this main area when clicking on this button, and also fixing the and creating the transitions.